Hi, this is Andy. Let's say things aren't going exactly how you'd like them to go at work, right? So I think an easy target to blame is your boss, right? I mean, they just seem to be getting in the way. And here's what I find: if you blame your boss, chances are you're right in that they're far from perfect. Other people will probably agree with you. And as it turns out, blaming your boss fixes nothing. And by the way, it's easy for bosses to do the same thing. Man, my people just don't step up and nobody wants to work hard these days. And similar to what I said before, you'll probably find people who agree with you, but it fixes nothing. What if there are some practical ways to fix some of the issues between bosses and employees instead of just complaining about them? I'm excited to introduce you today to Molly McGrath. She's the author of a new book entitled Fix My Boss: The Simple Plan to Cultivate Respect, Risk Courageous Conversations, and Increase the Bottom Line. What I think is unique about her book is that Molly provides insights to help both sides of the table, so to speak. If you're a manager and you want to improve your ability to unleash your team, there's content here for you. And if you're an employee who wants to better influence your boss, this book can help you as well. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about some of those practical ideas. Can't wait to share the discussion with you. A quick note, I want to invite you to join our Lead 52 family. It's a group of global leaders who are committed to transforming our ability to lead and deliver. It's 52 weeks of leadership learning delivered right to your inbox, taking less than 5 minutes a week. It's all for free. Learn more and sign up at getlead52.com. Thanks. Let's jump into today's discussion with Molly about her new book, Fix My Boss. Molly, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Oh, Andy, wow, what an intro. Thank you. I'm
Oh,
excited to be here. You nailed it. I did my job, so thank you.
well, you actually made it really easy to read it and to assimilate it. I mean, people listening to us can't hear it, but usually books are about twice this thick and half as practical. And so you made it for busy people. I think it is clear, right?
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the book in just a bit, but I'm often interested in someone's backstory, and specifically is what I mean. You mentioned your father in the book's dedication. What's a way that Mud McGrath influenced you about how you look at work or maybe being a leader?
Well, the quote that I have in the beginning of the book is a quote called "Don't quit." And I have a copy here in my office, and all of my two children, all of my nieces and nephews, we all have a copy at his funeral. My mother made a copy and had in there, and it's just that, like, no excuses in regard to quitting. You'd always get this story from him. Well, when I was a child, we walked uphill both ways barefoot in a raging snowstorm. You'd get the story at the dinner table on one of six when you didn't want to eat. There's starving children in China, and all the if you're old enough to resonate with these stories. And my dad, he's a hard working, and it's a blessing and a curse for me because,
For sure.
I think you said to me, it's very clear you're a very intentional person and strategic person, and you're being kind, because a lot of people will tell me that I'm unrelenting, and that's but you were very kind, and really that's the greatest thing that people use hardworking and what have you, but for my dad it's just about there's always an option, or there's always a solution, and just never quitting.
Yeah. When I was growing up, my dad was a bricklayer, and I just remember him saying, if I don't work, I don't get paid. And so, while other people are taking some corporate vacation, he goes, that's not how it works. And
Mm.
so I learned hard work, but you're right. There is, and I love my father, and I learned so much from him, but I, I also could easily overdo it because of that experience. And,
Mm.
and so I think it's interesting of making sure we take the best and be careful about the other parts. So anyway, I
Yes.
appreciate you sharing that. That was very helpful. Early in the book, you mentioned fix versus growth mindset, and I've yet to run across somebody that hears something like that and go, "Wow, Molly, that's so good to know because I have such an entrenched fixed mindset." Right? I think we don't see it in ourselves, but I think we struggle maybe with it more than what we realize. So I'm curious if you can think of some examples that maybe without even realizing it, we might struggle with a fixed mindset, and then how do you personally try to overcome situations like those?
I love that question. But it's really easy to spot. I'm all about like pocket coaching, what have you, versus having to study the theories between these two and just paying attention to your everyday habitual language. For example, like when you say, we can't, blah, 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 or we've already tried, blah, blah, blah. That's an example of a fixed mindset. And, giving people grace, it's a habit. I had a coach one time that said, you are no longer allowed to say, I don't know how. Assuming you knew the answer, what would it be? So when you catch yourself saying these things, it sometimes people will let each other off the hook. We already tried that. It didn't work. Or we can't do that because we're already too busy. Or there's no time in the calendar to create that. That is an indicator that you're dealing with a fixed mindset where it gives you the opportunity to take that power of the pause and in a fun way to hold each other accountable. I teach a online course and that's one of the rules. We're no longer to say we're too busy and we are no longer to say that we can't anymore. We're no longer able to say, let's just have fun and remove this from our language. And when we catch each other say it, I always I'm a huge fan of like signs. I'm like referee sign, time out, time out, time out. Let's pause. Let's explore if we could. How could this be possible?
Yeah, I like that so much. In fact, uh, you can't read your book without understanding that you believe in the power of the pause, and you just already said it. So I'm curious of some examples of how you've seen the power of the pause. Let's go both sides of the table with managers as well as employees.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about for managers. For me, I'm an entrepreneur, and at one point I was an employee. And for me, I was always afraid to bother my manager and my boss because I see them. I see their calendar. I see their workload. I see the stack. I notice that they haven't even finished their coffee and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They haven't even been eating lunch or what have you. And so for so often, we're always like afraid to bother or to interrupt or what have you. So for managers, you need to create these pauses in your calendar, whether it's open coaching hours for your team. For what I train my clients and their employees, and I'm really, really passionate about training employees, is creating these pauses hardwired in your calendar, a daily huddle. For you to have a weekly self management meeting. Some people call them planning meetings and things of that nature, but it's not just about your planning. Like really doing reflection, what worked and worked about last week, about my time, about my energy, about my attitude. Am I coming home and my family's getting the stressed out, grouchy version of me? And so often I think we put these in compartments, but they go everywhere. Or am I sitting on the soccer field and on my phone the whole time answering emails or what have you? And I see, speaking, these are all examples of what I have done and what have you. So for the manager, creating hardwired time for you for self-reflection, for self-planning, and I like to call them self-management meetings, but also having time for your team. I'm a huge, huge fan of doing a daily huddle or what have you. I always say to people, you do not create a Super Bowl winning team and sit down and create the plan and then just get on the field and go crazy and win the game. There are timeouts. There are halftime. After the game, you are watching endless, endless reels of footage about what worked, what didn't work, where can we learn from this, what have you. And so I really think that so often as busy entrepreneurs and leaders and what have you, deadlines and KPIs and all that jazz, we do a massive disservice by not creating those times in our calendar, both as an employee, before you're walking in the meeting, that you have that time in your calendar to get all your reporting together, to get your questions together, where you're coming in with proposed solutions versus constant problems, and all of us just being really self governing.
Mm. It was about 2 years ago, Molly, where I just felt like every day I was in front of an audience, and it's like the person who's in meetings all the time. There's no time to work on what they signed up to do in the meeting, sort of thing. It was like that for me. And so I'm like, I'm gonna take Mondays off the calendar. I'm just gonna take Mondays off the calendar for speaking. And if it's a keynote and if it's virtual, sure. But if it's a no full day workshops, having it's not the power of the pause, but it's kind of the power of the pause. It's
Yeah,
like
sure.
it's I can't remember exactly how I said, but it's wired into the calendar, right? And so then and revenue went up. Interestingly, I took 20% of the calendar off, and revenue went up. And so I Friday. So now it's rare. There's exceptions, but there's something about when you make space, it actually is life giving, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bookends. I call them bookends. Mondays
Mm.
and Fridays. Mondays, kind of your CEO, creativity, project time, and then Fridays. And here's a fun little trick that I do because guess who's the biggest violator of my calendar when I'm like, no, 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 no. I actually give my team a bonus if I put stuff on my calendar. Mine are Wednesdays, not Mondays. I do all my consulting, but I'd like a midweek, just like white space. But if I put anything on my calendar, where clients like, oh, you know what? All right, we can just hop in at a Zoom room for 30 minutes or what have you. And next thing I know, I said, you don't even ask for permission. You reschedule that, what have you. And if I violate my calendar, I owe you a $25 bonus.
Nice. They keep an eye on Wednesday. That's good. I like it.
Yes.
If I remember you saying correctly, you have a core value of your organization that you're willing to have courageous conversations. And what do we often see instead of that? And how's your willingness to foster that help you and your team?
Well, usually we have employees. I think there's this unwritten rule book that as employees we were given to, and we're always referencing our past boss, our past leader, our past position. And we believe that our role is to keep your mouth shut, do what you're told, put your head down, and you'll be rewarded with a paycheck at the end of the week. And so often we're suffering in silence. So the courageous conversations so often that if we don't have them upfront conversations in real time and be able to have those conversations to say, why are we doing it like this, because there's a better way, what have you, you're holding the company back by not saying things of that nature. So people just, they compound it, they suffer in silence or what have you, and then there's usually an eruption. So often when people are like, well, I don't like conflict or what have you, they want to say something that will help the company, the management, the leadership, the people, process, production. They say nothing. They don't like conflict or what have you. Like, conflict does not exist when you're having upfront conversations in real time. Conflict becomes conflict because people are keeping their mouth shut, suffering in silence, and not having these conversations in real time. And so then it becomes conflict because it becomes an eruption. So, one of the core values in my company is that. And if somebody comes back to me or somebody's bringing up something in May that happened in June that they never spoke their piece about, and then it's this vicious cycle and ripple effect. So if I have that in my meeting, my daily huddles, my weekly team meetings, and somebody bring one of the agenda item is what didn't work about last week, what didn't work about yesterday. And if people are bringing up stuff from 2 weeks, 2 months, or what have you, it's an indicator that we need to go back to our core values.
Yeah. Are there any other principles with the courageous conversation that somebody's listening to us? Because they need to get the book to actually get it all. But just one more idea. So have them regularly. You can provoke it. If we can initiate it by having questions like that of what didn't work yesterday. But any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Right now, I teach a online program with employees in there, and I teach them about this. And so their KPIs, it's a buzzword all over business now, um, uh, is that they're doing intake, receptionist, whatever you want to call client service coordinator, and their numbers are not great, right? And they have all this self-hatred, beating themselves up. Their boss is really upset with them, what have you. And I asked one question. I'm like, Ria, how much do you love the phones? She's like, I hate them. I'm like, why don't you are an amazing attribute to this team. I'm like, what parts of the process do you like? Well, finding out that it's back office. I always say people typically lean towards paper or people. I'm a people person. I don't ask me to make an Excel spreadsheet. That's not my jam, and I won't do it, and then I'll be in trouble because I miss deadlines and what have you. But I'm like, why don't you in the daily huddle really truly go have a conversation, because you hate these meetings because your head's on the chopping block because you're not booking the consultations, you're not doing the follow up calls, what have you. Raise your hand and let them know. They were so excited. I didn't share with her the back information. They were getting ready to fire her and they were struggling with it because they love her so much. She's so good, everything, but she's in the wrong seat on the bus,
Yeah.
and everything will change for you if you're willing to have, my favorite quote from the movie We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon is,
5 minutes. Or is it 1 minute?
huh?
Is it 1 minute or 5 minutes of insane?
20, all it takes is 20 seconds of
20
insane
seconds.
courage.
That's it. Yeah, I love that line. Yeah, 20 seconds. That's it. That's so
Yep.
true, Molly. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think I love your point on it is we don't we don't do it because we're afraid it'll create conflict, and by not doing it, it creates conflict.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's brilliant. One of the ideas in the book, in addition to like a daily huddle, is having a daily progress report. Now, someone listening to us might be like, "Wait, I'm hearing daily too often here, Molly." And let's say their first impression is, "Man, that sounds like micromanaging to me, having to put together a daily progress report." So, how do you see that differently, and what's the value of some form of this?
Yeah, what I love about it is that it's accountability, number one. It's not micromanaging and it's not extra work. It's again, it's power of the pause and action, if you will. So I love it. I even do a daily progress report for myself too, because it gives you clues for where we have a breakdown in areas of the business. And when you're sending that to your manager, I have my team send it to me, and I'm looking at Ria's, I'm looking at Crystal's, I'm looking at Pam's, I'm looking at, and I'm like, wow, if you think of it like laying it out on the proverbial conference room table, if you will, it doesn't take very long. I still like to print out paper and do that and get my highlighters. I'm a big fan of that. But I'm like, wow, this, here, what have you, because they're like walking, talking CEOs. And
Mm-hmm.
they're telling me, here are my goals for the day, and it's not shame, blame, weaponizing, but here's why I didn't accomplish them because of this, this, this. And chances are this, this, and this for this person, that, what have you. I'm like, we need a new CRM. This
Mm-hmm.
is why we're having a breakdown in production, and they give you such great data and information. So I always tell my teams when they're doing that, I need you to be my board of directors. In essence, this is what it's for, but it's also for you to really anchor into your celebrations, because you might have thought that you were going to get these three things done for today, but you got this one thing down, and the impact of you really having focus management and intentionality on this one thing, and it's been driving you crazy, and you crushed it, and the amount of revenue and client satisfaction and what have you attached to that. Like, I might change your job description a little bit and have that be your main focus, because now we can up level it and add this and this and this to it. So I'm always looking at it from that way.
Makes sense. You know what came to mind when I was reading it? What I liked about it was I don't even remember who it was that taught me this, but they said you drive behavior by the questions you ask. So whatever questions you
Mm.
ask, it drives behavior in a sense of this is me asking at the end of the day, or my boss asking me, what did you get done today? And it drives the behavior of, well, I have to account for my day. And it's not in a blame shame sort of way, but it's
Nope.
like you take credit for what you got done today. Like, I think it would help keep me focused. So
Yeah, and I love that you use that example, because two other things just pop in my mind. How often does a boss walk by going back from the restroom or a meeting, and they're like, hey, did you get blah, blah, blah done? And they're like, no, idiot, did you see like everything on here? I didn't get to it.
uh,
Or you get the emails, or now the Slacks and the texts and the Voxers and all that. It eliminates that, because you're going to get this state of the union at the end of the day, because so often when people ask that question, they take it a negative connotation, like you don't trust me or micromanagement, and it removes all those emotions and just anchors to information.
yeah, this just reminds me of the theme of accountability that goes all throughout your book. And I feel like sometimes in organizations, accountability is defined as screw up and you're dead, which is
Yes.
clearly not how you present it. So I'm curious if you have any misperceptions about accountability that you've seen with your clients, and maybe another thing in addition to what we talked about of what you do to try to help them increase it.
Yeah, it's always anchoring to what's your why for the business, for the project manager, leader, what have you, and right down to the employee, which I don't love that word, but team member, what have you, about accountability. I always am like, I think I just shared it with you before we started recording. I'm in a mastermind group and I'm constantly like, a thing that is driving me crazy. I'm not able to get weight training into my world, what have you. It works in the health industry, right? People are willing to write checks
Yeah.
for personal trainers that they have to be at the gym at 5 a.m., but they're not a morning person or what have you because they want that thing. They
Right.
want to, I always use the analogy of before your wedding to fit in that wedding dress or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, the dedication and determination. And the only way you get to there is there's tremendous amount of accountability. There's, that's the picture that you're going to look at for the rest of your life and is going to be everywhere. So you can visualize what it's going to look like at the end. And it's the flip side for accountability. When you're the leader, you got to go first.
Mm-hmm.
You need to set the parameters of the accountability that you need for the thing you don't do. Recording the podcast, starting the podcast or whatever, like your Mondays or my Wednesdays, and having it there, and you frame it, starts at the top and then everybody else has it too.
Yeah, you and I talked before we started recording about gamifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I told you that you helped me with without knowing it. You helped me with my fortune roll. But could you mind share an example of how you've gamified and how that's helped you with accountability?
Yeah, so even for with your 14-year-old or even with my story, I'm like, all right, my mastermind group, they're like entrepreneurs, professionals. Like, we're sick of hearing you say this. Here's the deal. You've been talking about this. You can't get weight training in your calendar. I do hot yoga, I work out, I walk my dog every morning, but this is the one thing that I really, really want as I get older and osteoporosis and all that jazz. And they're like, you have until the end of the day to hire a virtual personal trainer. I'm like, and you have to pay them up front. There's no back door.
Right.
And for 2 days a week, they're like, what are you willing to commit to? And I'm like, 3 days a week. And they're like, no, 2 days a week. You're not going to do it. And then so I did. I found someone. I interviewed a couple people. I don't know why I never even thought about that, especially post during COVID or what have you. She's in Atlanta, I'm in Colorado, and I kick off next Tuesday at 5 a.m.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's a way. And do you owe them? Did you say you owe them something if you don't do it, or is there any sort of gamifying with that?
No, I would have said that if I was doing the gym,
Aha, good call.
but they forgot about that.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But you gamified your schedule, of like
Yeah.
the Wednesdays and things like that. I don't. I'm just encouraged by this idea. It's just one of many in the book, and I you've kind of implied or mentioned this a little bit, but something that I feel like I hear a lot from people leading teams and projects is, Molly, I'm busy. Oh, I'm just so busy. I get the sense from your book that you don't accept that when a client
Mm-mm.
tells you, Molly, I'm busy. So, what are some lessons you've learned about when someone feels like they are busy?
Well, it's unfocused, really. Truly, it might be lack of clarity in their job description or in their projects, or maybe it's unrealistic of the amount of workload. Maybe they're saying yes too much, which is my problem, and what have you. It's about focus management. So when you're feeling that niggle and that tidal wave and that blender of too busy, it's again power of the pause. I always feel when I'm overwhelmed or busy or what have you, and this is what I train. Go to old school pen and paper. Go to the whiteboard. Dump it all out and figure it out and see if it's realistic, first of all, of what you're saying yes to. There might be things you have to delegate or start saying no to, or have a conversation with your leader or manager around this. But none of us are ever going to wake up and have 8 days a week and 14.5 hours in a day. We've all tried.
Right.
And so it's not a time issue. There's never going to be more time. It's really about intentionality and focus. So when people say that to me, I'm like, this is super exciting. I hear busy. Another version of that is stress. Another version of that is overwhelmed, what have you. And it's really that you are letting life dictate. You're not in control. And you're not in control by choice because you're not willing to sit down and really look at everything that you're saying yes to, whether delegated, voluntold, or you signed up for. It doesn't matter. And I always like to say gamification is one thing, but another word I like statement I like to say is like, let's just get deeply curious about everything in our world on our calendar, because we have our calendar, then we have our secret calendar that we said yes to,
Right.
and then we have the legal pads of all this stuff that we're saying yes to outside the meeting after, and it's unrealistic and it's unnecessary. And so, when people start saying I'm busy, I'm like, all right, time out. I want you to do a time effectiveness exercise. It's in the book. And no ifs, ands, or buts. I want you to track everything for 1 week and scan it and send it to me. And that for me is fun. It's like a little jigsaw puzzle. And then there's no more excuses until you can almost set a watch to it. I don't know about you, but like every 90 days, it starts bubbling and bubbling. And I'm like, it's violation of your own time template. It's saying yes to too much stuff. It's letting people delegate back up to you. It's not holding boundaries, accountability, daily huddle, those things. And it's really fun because there's always a strategy and solution for everything.
Yeah. It's such an empowering book in that way of let's not fall back to victim, right? Because that's what I feel like when I'm overwhelmed. Like I'm just a victim
Sure.
of this. And how do we get out of that? And you actually, you made a reference to something that reminded me of a previous book you've written. I just noticed it in the front part of the book. Beyond this book, you've done some writing about empowering and encouraging women in the workplace, if I'm not mistaken. And project management's been shown to be a really excellent career path for women. I'm just curious, what are a couple of the top messages you like to get across specifically to women as they navigate their careers?
Oh gosh, I wasn't expecting that question, but in regards to you can have it all.
Mm-hmm.
And in regards to being working, I've been a single working mom my whole life and raising children and running 3 businesses at one point. Now I'm down to one, what have you. So in regards to being a project manager of your entire life and being
Mm-hmm.
completely realistic about it. My first book was called Don't Be a Yes Chick.
Yeah.
And all of my books have kind of a fun title because I want employees to pick them up.
Mm-hmm.
So often, this book called Fix My Boss, it was originally called Fix My Employees.
Mm-hmm.
And my publisher, when we really started masterminding about it, I'm like, so many employees, especially if they have leaders and project managers, they go to these conferences or listen to a podcast, hear about a book, and bring it to them. Like, here, read this. You have to implement it. But it's like almost lands to the employees. What they've told me is you need to be fixed. Something's wrong with you. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
let's write a book that a boss creating vulnerability and connection can have fun with. Imagine if your boss buys this book and they hand it to you and they're like, here, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. Help me. And it's so fun. But for women in particular, I don't get all bunched up and hyped up about women are underpaid and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. I just, Brene Brown always talks about you can go on a witch hunt for evidence of all everyone's out to get you and wrong, or you go on the evidence on a witch hunt to figure out where all the good is and the opportunities are for you. And I think as women, there's a great opportunity for us, especially women in business and leadership and what have you, is by and large, we like to get to the point. I don't know if this resonates with anyone, but I don't have time with running kids and soccer and all this stuff. I got to be efficient and effective and get to the point. And a lot of times we're the truth tellers.
Mm-hmm.
And we're willing to have the conversations and upfront with compassion, with respect, and what have you, but we're highly efficient and we don't have a whole lot of patience for the water cooler like get to the point when especially in business. And so often I see, especially with male leaders or what have you, this came from my very first boss, and I think I write about it in both of my books, is that they're afraid to say anything because they're afraid that we're emotional and we're going to break down in tears and what have you. And it's like, no, I really want to empower women anymore to really find your voice, use your voice in an honest, well, respectful way. But I think we make the best project managers and leaders because we are highly like if especially if you're a mom or you're running a lot in your life, everything in your head is just a project focuser.
That's a great way of saying it. Yeah, there's so many things, Molly, I'd love to talk with you about. But let's end with this because we have a lot of parents who listen to the podcast. And parents and kids are not exactly employers and team members, all right? But what are some ways you've used some of the ideas from your book to help the business of your family, so to speak?
Oh gosh, I love this. It's so funny. Nothing makes me happier. My kids, I think you said earlier, you listened to a
Mm-hmm.
podcast and my son was I interviewed him when he was senior in high school and now he's 22 years old graduating from going into his master's program. But nothing great to hear my kids say things like, well, just to clarify and verify, and that's a strategy I use around project management, due dates, accountability, what have you. Those are buzzwords. And it's so fun because I'll hear him even talking to his buddies on the phone. He's like, well, just to clarify, we're meeting at 5 o'clock at Ruby Tuesdays, like, in boys especially. But truly, my kids, one of the statements in my house has always been, your failure to plan is not my crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll even hear them say that all the time. So my kids walk and talk like little project managers
Mm-hmm.
from the time I'll see them with their to-do lists or what have you, or even we run a weekly family meeting. So even when they were in college, we'd get in the Zoom room. And my daughter's up in Boulder and going into her sophomore year in college. We'll have a family meeting, going through our calendar, going through what we're doing on our plate. When are your exams coming up? When's your rent due? When's your what have you? And it's really great because I teach them do not send me a text and tell me that you need money for rent on June 2nd because I'm going to delete it and I'm
Right.
not going to answer it. And then you're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah, I love it. Just imagine how that's going to compound over the course of their lifetime, Molly. What a gift to have you as a mom. For those
Oh,
listening, this is just a taste of what you can learn from Molly's book. If you'd like some action focused ideas on how to improve your ability to lead a team or work with your boss, check out Molly's latest book, Fix My Boss. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, Molly, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
oh, Andy, you're a fantastic host. Thanks for having me.